The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers, crystal shards exploding across the marble floor like my shattered world. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse gym I now owned, I watched my ex-husband Dylan stumble out of his rusted Honda, the same car he'd driven away in when he left me for my sister exactly 1 year ago. But tonight wasn't about the past. Tonight was about the present, and the man whose arms wrapped around my waist from behind, his diamond ring catching the city lights as his hands settled protectively over mine. "Is that him?" Caleb whispered against my ear, his voice carrying the kind of quiet strength that had rebuilt me piece by piece. I nodded, unable to speak as Dylan's eyes found mine through the window. Even from this distance I could see his face crumple when he spotted Caleb. The mighty Dylan Wilson, the man who told me my sister was everything I'm not, stood on the sidewalk like a beggar outside a palace he'd never be invited into again. My phone buzzed. A text from Dylan. "Betty, please. I made a mistake. Laura isn't, she's not you. Can we talk?" I threw back my head and laughed, a sound so sharp and sweet it could cut glass. Because Dylan Wilson had no idea what was really coming for him. The revenge I'd planned wasn't just about success or happiness. It was about something far more delicious than that. 1 year earlier, I should have known something was wrong when Dylan started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. Not because he'd never worked late before. He had plenty of times during his accounting firm's busy season. But this was different. These late nights came with new cologne, fresh haircuts, and a distance in his eyes that made my stomach twist into knots. We'd been married for 3 years. 3 years of what I thought was happiness in our modest 2-bedroom house on Elm Street. I worked as a personal trainer at FitZone, barely making enough to cover groceries, while Dylan's steady income kept us afloat. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. The morning everything changed started like any other. I was in the kitchen making Dylan's coffee, 2 sugars, splash of cream just the way he liked it, when he walked in wearing an expression I'd never seen before. His jaw was set, his blue eyes avoiding mine, and his hands shook slightly as he straightened his tie. "Betty, we need to talk." Those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. I set down the coffee mug so hard it sloshed over the rim, brown liquid spreading across our yellow countertop like a stain I knew would never come out. "What's wrong?" I managed to ask, though every instinct in my body was screaming the answer. Dylan ran his hands through his brown hair I'd run my own fingers through countless times, and finally looked at me. What I saw in his eyes made my knees buckle. Pity, guilt, and worst of all, relief. "I can't keep lying to myself," he said, his voice steady in a way that told me he'd practiced this speech. "Your sister is the one I really want." The world tilted sideways. Or, my baby sister, 5 years younger than my 28 years, with her perfect blonde curls and size 2 figure. Laura, who'd been staying with us for the past 2 months after losing her job. Laura, who I'd cooked for, worried about, and loved with every protective instinct I had. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Betty. I never meant for this to happen, but Laura and we have something. Something I've never felt before." He was talking faster now, words tumbling over each other like he wanted to get them all out before I could respond. "We're in love. Real love. And I can't pretend anymore that what we have is enough. What we have isn't enough." 3 years of marriage reduced to not enough in a single sentence. I stared at him, this man I'd shared a bed with, made plans with, dreamed of growing old with. His face was flushed, but not with shame, with excitement. He was excited to leave me. "Laura," I repeated because my brain couldn't process anything else. "She's waiting in the car," Dylan said, glancing toward the window. "We're going to your parents' house. To tell them together. To do this right. To do this right." As if there was a right way to destroy someone's life. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, like ice forming around my heart. When I spoke, my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat, emotionless. "Then have her." Dylan blinked, clearly expecting tears, begging, maybe even a fight. But I gave him nothing. Just those 3 words, delivered with the kind of calm that comes before a storm. "Betty, get out." I turned away from him, back to the coffee that was already growing cold. "Take whatever you want and get out." I heard him hesitate behind me, maybe expecting some kind of dramatic breakdown. But I remained perfectly still, hands gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. After what felt like an eternity, I heard his footsteps, the sound of him grabbing clothes from our bedroom, And finally the front door closing with a soft click that seemed to echo through the empty house. Only then did I allow myself to look out the window. Dylan was loading a suitcase into a car I didn't recognize. A shiny red convertible that screamed Laura's style. And there she was, my sister, sitting in the passenger seat with her golden hair catching the morning sunlight. She looked up at the house, directly at the window where I stood, and for just a moment our eyes met. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look guilty. She looked triumphant. That's when I understood. This wasn't some accidental falling in love. This was planned. Calculated. Laura had come to stay with us with this exact goal in mind. As the car pulled away, I sank to the kitchen floor and finally let myself cry. But even as tears streamed down my face, that cold, hard thing in my chest was growing. Fretting. Turning into something else entirely. Revenge. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. The call came 3 hours after Dylan left. Mom's voice was gentle but firm, the tone she'd used when Laura and I were children, and she needed to deliver news she thought might upset us. "Betty, honey, can you come over? Your father and I need to talk to you." I knew what this was about. Dylan and Laura had made their announcement, and now my parents wanted to do damage control. Or worse, they wanted to convince me that this was somehow for the best. The drive to my childhood home felt like walking to my own execution. Every familiar landmark. The corner store where Laura and I used to buy candy, the park where we'd played as children, the school where I'd always been the one to walk her to class on her first day, now felt like evidence of a life built on lies. My parents' house looked exactly the same as it had my entire life. A modest ranch-style home with Mom's beloved rose garden out front and Dad's workshop tucked behind the garage. But when I knocked on the door, something fundamental had changed. Mom answered, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. Behind her, I could see Laura sitting on the familiar plaid couch, Dylan's arm around her shoulders like he belonged there. Like he'd always belonged there instead of with me. "Come sit down, sweetheart," Mom said, guiding me to the chair across from the couch. The chair that suddenly felt like the defendant's seat in a courtroom. Dad cleared his throat, a sound that had always meant serious business in our house. "Betty, we know this is hard. But sometimes life throws us curveballs and we have to adapt." Adapt. As if my husband leaving me for my sister was weather I needed to adjust to. "Laura and Dylan have been honest with us about their feelings," Mom continued, her voice taking on that patient tone she'd always used when explaining why I couldn't have something I wanted. "And while the timing isn't ideal, we can't deny that they've found something special together." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Laura had always been beautiful, but she'd never looked more radiant than she did sitting there with my husband's arm around her. Her blue eyes sparkled with happiness that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "I know you're hurt, Betty," Laura said, her voice soft and sweet as always. "But you have to understand, neither of us planned this. It just happened. Sometimes love doesn't follow the rules we want it to." "Love," I repeated, tasting the word like poison. "Yes," Dylan said, speaking for the first time since I'd arrived. "Real love. The kind that changes everything." He squeezed Laura's hand and I noticed she was wearing a ring. Not my ring. Something new, something that sparkled in the afternoon light streaming through Mom's lace curtains. "You're engaged," I said. "We wanted you to hear it from us first," Laura said, holding up her hand so the diamond caught the light. "We're getting married next month. Here in the backyard. Mom and Dad have already started planning." The room started spinning. Next month. They were getting married next month in my parents' backyard with my parents' blessing. Less than 24 hours after Dylan had told me he was leaving, they were already planning their wedding. "We hope you'll be there," Mom said gently. "I know it's complicated, but family is family. And we need to support each other through this transition." Transition. Like my marriage ending was a corporate restructure. "Betty." Dad's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay? You look pale." I realized I'd been holding my breath. When I finally exhaled, it came out as something between a laugh and a sob. "You want me to come to their wedding. We want our family to stay together," Mom said firmly. "This is hard for everyone, but we can get through it if we support each other." "Laura made a mistake with her last relationship," Dad added, as if this explanation made everything clear. "She's been so lost lately. But with Dylan she's found herself again. We haven't seen her this happy in years. Laura's happiness. Always Laura's happiness, even when it came at the expense of mine. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. 4 pairs of eyes watched me. Mom's anxious, Dad's cautiously hopeful, Laura's bright with anticipation, and Dylan's. Dylan's eyes held something that might have been regret, but looked more like impatience. I need to go, I said. Betty, please. Laura started to stand, but I held up my hand. No. Just, no. I looked at each of them in turn, memorizing their faces in this moment. I need time to process this. Of course, Mom said quickly. Take all the time you need. But remember, we love you. All of us. I walked to the door on shaking legs, my hand on the doorknob, when Laura's voice stopped me. Betty? I really am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I turned back to look at her one last time. My baby sister, the person I'd protected and loved and worried about my entire life, sitting in my husband's arms in our parents' living room, wearing an engagement ring that cost more than I made in 3 months. No, I said quietly. You're not. And then I left, closing the door on the family I'd thought I knew, walking toward a future I couldn't yet imagine but knew would be nothing like the life I'd planned. Behind me I could hear muffled voices. Probably my parents trying to smooth things over, make excuses for my reaction. But I didn't care anymore. I was done being the understanding one, the reasonable one, the one who always put everyone else's needs first. It was time to put myself first for once. It was time for Betty Wilson to disappear and someone new to take her place. The first thing I did when I got home was throw Dylan's coffee mug in the trash. The second thing I did was call my boss at Owne and quit my job. The third thing I did was sit on my kitchen floor and make a list. What do I have? $3,000 in my personal savings account. A certification in personal training. A house that would probably be worth nothing once Dylan's lawyer got involved. Absolutely nothing left to lose. What do I want? That was harder to answer. For 3 years what I'd wanted was Dylan's love, my family's approval, and a quiet life that didn't make waves. Now those things felt like someone else's dreams. What did Betty, the new Betty, the one who was about to be born from the ashes of the old one, actually want? I want to matter. I want to be powerful. I want to be so successful that when Dylan sees me he realizes exactly what he threw away. And I want him to suffer for it. The next morning I drove downtown to the business district. I'd never paid much attention to this part of the city before. Dylan had always said it was pretentious and full of people trying too hard. But now, walking down the tree-lined streets with their gleaming office buildings and trendy cafes, I felt something I'd never felt before. Possibility. That's when I saw it. A for lease sign in the window of a large corner building with huge windows and enough space for anything I could imagine. The real estate agent, a sharp-dressed woman named Victoria Chin, met me there within an hour. It's been empty for 6 months, she explained as we walked through the echoing space. The last tenant was a furniture showroom, but they couldn't make the rent work. To be honest, it's a tough location for retail. Too expensive for most businesses and the foot traffic isn't consistent. But I wasn't seeing a failed furniture showroom. I was seeing something else entirely. The space had 20-foot ceilings, a wall of windows facing the street, and enough square footage for dozens of pieces of equipment. The back area could be converted into private training rooms, maybe even a juice bar. What would it take to convert this into a gym? I asked. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. A gym? That's actually not a terrible idea. The building is already zoned for commercial fitness use. The previous tenant before the furniture store was a dance studio. But the build-out costs would be substantial. And the rent alone is $15,000 a month. $15,000 a month. I made less than that in 3 months at Owne. What if I could guarantee the first year's rent up front? I heard myself asking. Victoria laughed, but not unkindly. Honey, that would be $180,000 plus security deposit. No offense, but you don't look like you have that kind of money lying around. He was right. I didn't. I was about to. That afternoon I called my divorce lawyer. Or rather, the divorce lawyer I was about to hire. Mitchell Kane had a reputation as the most ruthless family attorney in the city, and his hourly rate reflected it. But I needed ruthless. Mrs. Wilson, he said during our consultation, his silver hair gleaming under the harsh lights of his downtown office. I'll be direct with you. Your husband leaving you for another woman, especially a family member, puts you in an extremely strong position. The house, his retirement accounts, alimony, we can make this very expensive for him. I don't want alimony, I said, surprising him. Mrs. Wilson, given the circumstances. I want a lump sum. Everything I'm entitled to paid out immediately. And I want him to have to explain to everyone exactly why he's paying it. Mitchell's eyes lit up with something that might have been respect. Now that's interesting. Yes, we can certainly explore that option. It would likely be less money overall than long-term alimony, but if you're looking to make a clean break. I am. And if you're looking to make a statement. I smiled for the first time since Dylan had walked out. I am. 3 weeks later, Dylan's lawyer called Mitchell in a panic. I was asking for the house, half of Dylan's retirement accounts, and a $200,000 settlement for emotional distress caused by adultery. In exchange, I would agree to a quick, uncontested divorce and waive all rights to future alimony. Your client can't be serious, Dylan's lawyer sputtered during a conference call I insisted on joining. My client doesn't have that kind of liquid cash. Then your client should have thought of that before he decided to have an affair with his wife's sister, Mitchell replied smoothly. My client has documentation of their relationship dating back months before Mr. Wilson left the marital home. This constitutes a clear case of adultery, and in this state, that has significant bearing on asset division. I could hear Dylan's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. His lawyer came back on the line sounding defeated. We'll need time to explore financing options. You have 48 hours, Mitchell said. After that, we file for a contested divorce and ask for everything plus legal fees. Dylan paid. He took out loans against his retirement accounts, mortgaged the house to the hilt, and even borrowed money from my parents. But he paid every penny, and he did it within the deadline. The day the money hit my account, I drove back downtown and walked into Victoria's office. I'd like to lease that corner space, I said, sliding a certified check across her desk. First year's rent, plus security deposit, plus $50,000 for build-out costs. Victoria stared at the check like it might disappear. How did you? Does it matter? She looked up at me and I could see her reassessing everything about me. No, she said finally. It doesn't matter at all. 2 hours later, I was the proud lessee of 5,000 square feet of empty space in the most expensive commercial district in the city. I had 4 months left of rent money in the bank and absolutely no idea what I was doing. But for the first time since Dylan had walked out, I felt alive. The construction took 3 months and cost twice what I'd budgeted. But watching the space transform from an empty shell into something magnificent was like watching myself transform from the inside out. I spent 18-hour days on site, learning everything from electrical work to business permits. I haggled with contractors, researched equipment suppliers, and studied business plans until my eyes burned. Every night I fell into bed exhausted, covered in dust and paint, but more energized than I'd ever felt in my life. The gym I was creating wasn't just a fitness center. It was a statement. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light. State-of-the-art equipment gleamed like jewelry against polished concrete floors. The private training rooms had sound systems that could pump out anything from classical music to heavy metal, depending on what motivated each client. But the crown jewel was the rooftop deck I'd convinced the building owner to let me develop. 30 feet above street level with a view of the entire downtown skyline, it became an outdoor training space unlike anything else in the city. I named it Phoenix Fitness, because I was rising from the ashes of everything I used to be. 3 weeks before opening, I realized I had a problem. I had a beautiful gym, top-of-the-line equipment, and absolutely zero clients. All the money in the world couldn't buy me what I needed most: credibility. That's when I met Caleb Whalen. I was on the rooftop deck at sunset testing out the new sound system when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. I turned to find a man about my age, dark-haired and broad-shouldered, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern accent that made every word sound like honey. "I'm Caleb Whalen. I own the marketing firm 2 floors down." I couldn't help but notice all the construction activity. Caleb Whalen. I'd heard the name. His company handled advertising for some of the biggest businesses in the city. But I'd expected someone older, more corporate. This Caleb Whalen looked like he could have been one of my personal training clients if I'd had any. Betty Wilson, I said, walking over to shake his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted just a moment longer than necessary. So this is going to be a gym? He looked around the rooftop space, taking in the carefully planned layout, the high-end equipment, the view that stretched for miles in every direction. Phoenix Fitness, I said, surprised by how proud I sounded saying it. We open in 3 weeks. Phoenix, he repeated thoughtfully. Rising from the ashes? Something like that. Caleb was quiet for a moment, still looking around. When he spoke again, his voice was different. More serious, more interested. Can I ask you something, Betty Wilson? Sure. What makes this place different from every other gym in the city? It was a simple question, but something about the way he asked it made me pause. This wasn't small talk. He was genuinely curious. Have you ever been to a gym where you felt like you mattered? I asked finally. What do you mean? I mean really mattered. Where the staff knew your name, your goals, your fears. Where the programming was designed specifically for you, not just copied from some corporate manual. Where you felt like the success of your workout was as important to everyone else as it was to you. Caleb shook his head slowly. No, I don't think I have. That's what makes this place different. Every person who walks through that door is going to matter. Their transformation is going to be our mission, not just their membership fee. Something flickered in Caleb's eyes. Recognition maybe, or approval. That's a beautiful philosophy, he said. But philosophy doesn't pay for equipment this nice. He gestured toward the high-end machines scattered across the deck. This setup cost a fortune. It did. And you're planning to recoup that investment with personalized attention and knowing everyone's name? He wasn't mocking me, but I could hear the skepticism in his voice. The same skepticism I'd been fighting in my own head for months. I'm planning to recoup it by being so good at what I do that people won't even consider going anywhere else, I said. By creating something that can't be replicated by a chain gym or copied by a competitor. By making this place essential. Caleb nodded slowly. That's smart. Really smart. But you know what would make it even smarter? What? Making sure people know about it. And that's how Caleb Whalen became the first person to believe in Phoenix Fitness besides me. His marketing campaign was unlike anything I could have imagined. Instead of traditional gym advertisements featuring impossibly fit models, Caleb created something that felt more like an art project. Black and white photographs of real people. A grandmother training for her first 5K, a businessman learning to deadlift, a teenager building confidence one rep at a time, with simple captions about transformation and possibility. The tagline was perfect. Phoenix Fitness. Where your transformation begins. It's not about selling gym memberships, Caleb explained as we reviewed the campaign materials in his office. It's about selling hope. People don't join gyms because they love exercise. They join because they want to become someone different than who they are today. The ad started running 2 weeks before opening, and my phone immediately started ringing. Not just with membership inquiries, but with something I hadn't expected. Media attention. A local lifestyle blogger wanted to feature Phoenix Fitness in an article about boutique fitness trends. A radio show asked me to come on and talk about the philosophy behind the gym. The Business Journal requested an interview about female entrepreneurs in the fitness industry. Suddenly, Betty Wilson, the woman who'd never been anyone special, who'd never been the star of anything, was being treated like an expert. Like someone worth listening to. 3 days before opening, Caleb knocked on the gym door at 7 in the morning. I'd been there since 5, doing final equipment checks and obsessively cleaning surfaces that were already spotless. Nervous? He asked, looking around the gleaming space. Terrified, I admitted. Good. Terror means it matters to you. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee and a small wrapped box. Opening gift, he said, handing me the box. Inside was a bronze nameplate, Betty Wilson, owner. Simple, elegant, permanent. For your desk, Caleb said. So you never forget who made all this happen. I looked up at him, this man who'd appeared in my life at exactly the moment I'd needed him most, and felt something shift in my chest. Something warm and unfamiliar and dangerous. Thank you, I said. For everything. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have, Caleb said quietly. You would have found another way. That's who you are, Betty Wilson. You find a way. The next morning, Phoenix Fitness opened its doors for the first time. By noon I had 12 new members. By the end of the week, 28. By the end of the month I had a waiting list. But the real moment of triumph came 6 weeks after opening, when I was working late one evening and happened to look out the front windows. Across the street, parked under a streetlight like he'd been there for hours, sat Dylan in his rusted Honda. He was staring at the gym, at the lights, the people working out, the success I'd built from the ashes of our marriage. His face was pressed against his car window like a kid looking into a toy store he couldn't afford. I walked to the window and stood there in full view, knowing he could see me. For a long moment, we looked at each other across the distance that had grown between us. Then I smiled, not a kind smile, not a forgiving smile, but the smile of someone who had gotten exactly what she wanted and turned away. When I looked back 5 minutes later, he was gone. But I knew he'd be back. Because this was only the beginning. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper with gold lettering, delivered by my mother personally to the gym on a Tuesday morning when she knew I'd be there. Laura Wilson and Dylan Wilson request the pleasure of your company. Laura Wilson. She was already using his name, even though they weren't married yet. I know this is hard, Mom said, standing in my gleaming reception area like she was afraid to touch anything. But it would mean everything to your sister if you came. I looked at my mother, really looked at her. When had she gotten so small? When had her hair gone completely gray? When had she started looking at me like she was afraid of what I might say or do? Would it mean everything to Laura? I asked. Or would it mean everything to you? Mom's face flushed. Betty, please. I know you're angry. I'm not angry, I said, and realized it was true. The rage that had burned in me for months had crystallized into something harder and more focused. I'm just busy. I gestured around the gym, which was bustling with the afternoon crowd. Every piece of equipment was being used. The private training rooms were booked solid. Through the windows, Mom could see the success I'd built, the life I'd created without her blessing or anyone else's. This is impressive, she admitted reluctantly. Your father and I had no idea that you could. That I could what? Build something? Run a business? Succeed without Dylan? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I softened my voice, not out of kindness but because I'd learned that quiet confidence was more powerful than shouting. You all thought I was the weak one. The one who needed taking care of. The one who would fall apart without a man to tell her what to do. Mom opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Because we both knew I was right. The wedding is this Saturday, she said finally. 2 o'clock in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just family. Just family, I repeated. And I'm family. Of course you are. Even though you're hosting a wedding for my ex-husband and my sister 4 months after my divorce was finalized. Mom's eyes filled with tears. The same tears she'd cried when I was a child, and she couldn't understand why I was being difficult. Betty, we didn't want this to happen. None of us did. But it did happen, and now we have to make the best of it. Laura's my daughter too. I can't abandon her because of the circumstances. But you can abandon me. We're not abandoning you. We're here, aren't we? We want you to be part of this. As what? The bitter ex-wife who graciously accepts her replacement? The bigger person who puts everyone else's happiness above her own? No thank you. I walked toward my office, conversation over, but Mom's voice stopped me. If you don't come, you're going to regret it. Family is all we have, Betty. Don't let your pride destroy that. I turned back to look at her one last time. My pride isn't what destroyed this family, Mom. Your choices did. After she left, I sat in my office staring at the invitation until the gold lettering blurred. Saturday at 2 o'clock, Dylan and Laura would promise to love each other forever in the same backyard where I'd played as a child, where I'd had birthday parties and family barbecues and dreamed about my own wedding someday. They wanted me there to witness it, to bless it with my presence, to prove that everything was forgiven and forgotten and we could all just move on like nothing had happened. But I had other plans for Saturday at 2 o'clock. Saturday morning dawned clear and warm, perfect wedding weather. I woke up early not because I was nervous or upset, but because I had a lot to do before 2 o'clock. First I went to the gym. Even though we were closed to regular members, I had a special appointment scheduled. Caleb had been training with me privately for the past month, and today's session was important for reasons he didn't yet understand. You seem different today, he said as we worked through his routine on the rooftop deck. Focused. Like you're preparing for something. Maybe I am. Caleb paused mid-rep and looked at me with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Betty, what are you up to? Nothing illegal, I said with a smile. That's not reassuring. It should be. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. After Caleb's session, I went home to get ready. Not for a wedding. I wouldn't be attending my sister's wedding. Instead, I had somewhere much more important to be. At exactly 2 o'clock, I was standing in the office of the city's most exclusive country club, signing membership papers with the club president himself. Ms. Wilson, he said, shaking my hand with the kind of respect reserved for people who wrote very large checks. Welcome to Riverside Country Club. I think you're going to find our facilities exceed your expectations. The membership fee was $50,000. Money that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago, but that Phoenix Fitness had already earned back and more. The country club membership wasn't just about the prestige, though that was certainly part of it. It was about access to a world that Dylan had always said we couldn't afford, connections he'd claimed we didn't need. More importantly, it was about being seen. At 2:15, while Dylan and Laura were exchanging vows in my parents' backyard, I was being introduced to the Riverside Country Club's executive committee at their weekly meeting. By 2:30, I'd scheduled a meeting with 3 potential corporate clients who wanted to arrange employee fitness programs through Phoenix Fitness. At 3 o'clock, while the wedding reception was probably just getting started, I was on the country club's terrace having champagne with Margaret Blackwood, the wife of the city's most prominent real estate developer and, according to Caleb's research, one of the most influential women in town. I've heard wonderful things about your gym, Margaret said, her silver hair perfectly styled and her diamonds catching the afternoon sunlight. Several of my friends have mentioned it. They say you're doing something quite revolutionary. I'm just trying to help people become their best selves, I said. Modest and successful. How refreshing. Margaret smiled. I have a proposition for you, Betty. My husband is developing a new luxury residential complex, Pinnacle Heights. We're looking for exclusive amenities to set it apart from other high-end properties. What would you think about opening a second location there? Something smaller than your downtown facility, but equally luxurious. A second location. Expansion. The kind of opportunity that could turn Phoenix Fitness from a successful single gym into a brand. I'd be very interested in discussing that, I said. Excellent. Why don't you come to dinner next Friday? My husband will be there along with a few other people you should meet. 7 o'clock. At 4 o'clock I was back at the gym, catching up on administrative work when Caleb knocked on my office door. How was the wedding? He asked. I wouldn't know. I didn't go. Caleb's eyebrows shot up. You didn't go to your sister's wedding? I had more important things to do. I told him about the country club membership, the meeting with Margaret Blackwood, the potential second location. Betty, Caleb said slowly, that's incredible. But are you sure you're doing this for the right reasons? What do you mean? I mean, are you expanding your business because it's the smart business decision, or because you want to show your ex-husband how successful you've become? I considered the question seriously. 6 months ago the answer would have been purely about revenge. But now. Both, I said honestly. And I'm okay with that. Caleb studied my face for a long moment. You know what I think? What? I think you've already won. You just don't realize it yet. Before I could ask what he meant, my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Betty, it's Laura. Can we please talk? Something's happened. I showed the message to Caleb, who frowned. That's odd timing. Right after the wedding. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from Mom, her voice tight with stress. Betty, honey, please call me back. There's been a situation. We need to talk. Something's wrong, I said, though I couldn't bring myself to feel concerned. Whatever drama was unfolding in my old life felt like someone else's problem now. But Caleb was already reaching for his keys. Come on. Let's go find out what happened. We arrived at my parents' house to find cars scattered across the lawn and neighbors gathered in small groups on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing. The wedding decorations were still up. White chairs arranged in neat rows, flowers wilting in the afternoon heat, a wedding arch that looked abandoned and sad. But there was no celebration happening. Instead, there was shouting coming from inside the house. Mom met us at the front door, her face pale and her carefully styled hair disheveled. "Betty, thank God you're here," she said, grabbing my arm. "I know you didn't want to be part of this, but we need you. Laura needs you." "What's going on?" "It's Dylan," Mom said, glancing nervously toward the living room where the shouting was getting louder. "Well, he called off the wedding. Right before the vows. In front of everyone." I felt Caleb's hand settle on my lower back, steadying me. "He what?" "He said he couldn't do it. Said he'd made a mistake." He just left. Drove away and left Laura standing there in her wedding dress. The shouting from the living room suddenly stopped, and in the silence that followed, I could hear Laura crying. Not the delicate tears of a disappointed bride, but ugly, desperate sobs that made my chest tight despite everything. "Where is he now?" I asked. "We don't know. He's not answering his phone. His parents are furious. They'd already paid for the catering, the flowers, everything. And poor Laura." Mom's voice broke. "She's devastated. She keeps saying it's her fault, that she did something wrong." Against my better judgment, I found myself walking toward the living room. Laura was sitting on the couch in her wedding dress, a simple white gown that had probably cost more than my monthly rent, surrounded by crumpled tissues and sympathetic relatives. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Betty," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old protective instinct I'd always had for my little sister. She looked so young, so broken, sitting there in her ruined wedding dress. "What did Dylan say exactly?" I asked, sitting down beside her. "He said," Laura hiccuped, wiping her nose with a tissue. "He said he realized he was marrying me for the wrong reasons. That he was trying to prove something to himself, but it wasn't fair to me. That I deserved someone who loved me for who I really am, not as a replacement for someone else." The relatives around us shifted uncomfortably, because everyone in that room knew exactly who the someone else was. "He said he never should have left you," Laura continued, her voice barely audible. "That the biggest mistake of his life wasn't marrying you, it was leaving you. And that marrying me would just make it worse." A cold silence settled over the room. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting to see how I would react to the news that my ex-husband had realized he'd made a mistake. "I see," I said finally. "Betty, I know you have every right to hate me," Laura said, grabbing my hands. "I know what I did was unforgivable. But I really did love him. Thought he loved me too. I thought we could be happy." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was falling out of its elaborate updo, and her wedding dress was stained with tears and mascara. She looked nothing like the triumphant woman who'd stolen my husband. She looked like what she actually was. A 23-year-old girl who'd made a terrible mistake and was just now beginning to understand the consequences. "I don't hate you, Laura," I said, and meant it. "I feel sorry for you." "Sorry for me? You thought you won something when you got Dylan. But you didn't win a prize. You won a man who was capable of leaving his wife for her sister. Did you really think someone like that would be faithful to you?" Laura's face went white. "What do you mean?" I looked around the room at all the faces turned toward us. Relatives who'd spent the day gossiping about family drama, neighbors who'd come for free cake and stayed for the show. "Caleb," I said quietly, "could you give us some privacy?" Caleb nodded and began diplomatically ushering people toward the kitchen and backyard. Within a few minutes, it was just me, Laura, and Mom in the living room. "Laura," I said gently, "how long do you think Dylan was planning to leave me before he actually did it?" What do you mean? I mean, do you think he woke up that morning and suddenly realized he loved you? Or do you think he'd been thinking about it for a while?" "He said it just happened." "Nothing just happens, Laura. Marriages don't end overnight. Affairs don't start by accident. Dylan was unhappy with me and he decided you were the solution to that unhappiness. But here's what you didn't understand. You weren't the solution. You were just the distraction." Laura stared at me, her blue eyes wide with dawning realization. "When the excitement of the forbidden wore off, when the drama of breaking up my marriage was over, when you were just his girlfriend instead of his secret, what did you have left?" Laura started, then stopped. What did you have?" Laura was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small and uncertain. "I don't know. We were always sneaking around or dealing with family drama or planning the wedding. We never just We're together. Normally. And when you tried to be together normally, how did it feel? Another long silence. Then, empty. I nodded. Dylan didn't leave me because he loved you more than he loved me. He left me because he was bored with his life and thought changing wives would fix that. But the problem was never me, Laura. The problem was him. Then why did he leave you? Laura asked, genuine confusion in her voice. Because it was easier than doing the hard work of figuring out what actually made him unhappy and fixing it. Because blaming our marriage for his problems meant he didn't have to take responsibility for them. Because starting over with someone new felt more exciting than working on what we already had. Mom had been silent through this entire conversation, but now she spoke up. Betty, you sound like you've thought about this a lot. I've had almost a year to think about it. And you're not angry? I considered the question. I was angry. For months I was furious. But somewhere along the way I realized that being angry at Dylan was like being angry at a tornado for destroying my house. He didn't set out to hurt me, he just did what he always does when life gets complicated. He runs away. So what happens now? Laura asked. Now you learn the same lesson I learned. That Dylan Wilson is not your happy ending. He's just a chapter in your story, a chapter you can learn from and move on from. But I love him, Laura whispered. No, you don't. You love the idea of him. You love the excitement of being chosen over someone else. You love feeling like you won something. But you don't love Dylan because you don't actually know who Dylan is when he's not running away from something. Laura was crying again, but quietly now. What am I supposed to do? Everyone knows what happened. Everyone knows I was left at the altar by my sister's ex-husband. I can't show my face anywhere. Yes, you can, I said firmly. You hold your head high and you move forward. You find out who Laura is when she's not trying to be someone else's salvation. You build a life that belongs to you, not one that you stole from someone else. I don't know how to do that. Then learn. The same way I did. I stood up, smoothing down my dress. A simple navy blue sheath that cost more than Laura's wedding dress and looked infinitely more elegant. Where are you going? Mom asked. Back to my life. The one I built after your daughter and my ex-husband destroyed the old one. Betty, wait. Laura grabbed my hand. Can you forgive me? Eventually. I looked down at my sister, still in her ruined wedding dress, still hoping someone else would fix the mess she'd made. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Laura. Something you earn. And earning it starts with taking responsibility for what you did and making sure you never do it again. I gently pulled my hand free and walked toward the door. Caleb was waiting for me on the front porch, leaning against the railing with his hands in his pockets. How do you feel? He asked as we walked to his car. Lighter, I said, surprised to realize it was true. Like I just put down something heavy I'd been carrying for too long. Dylan's going to come back, you know, Caleb said as we drove away from the house. After this disaster, he's going to realize what he lost and try to win you back. I looked out the window at the familiar neighborhoods of my childhood, streets I'd driven down 1,000 times when I was the old Betty. The Betty who'd been satisfied with small dreams and other people's approval. Let him try, I said. It'll be entertaining. Caleb was right. Dylan came back exactly 2 weeks after the failed wedding, showing up at Phoenix Fitness on a Thursday evening just as I was locking up. I saw him before he saw me, standing next to his rusted Honda across the street, staring at the gym like he couldn't quite believe it was real. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him and his clothes hung loose on his frame. His hair needed cutting and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and bad decisions. He looked like a man who'd finally realized the magnitude of what he'd thrown away. I could have gone out the back exit. Could have avoided the confrontation entirely. But I didn't want to avoid it. I'd been preparing for this moment for months and I was ready. Hello, Dylan, I said, walking directly toward him. He startled, clearly not expecting me to approach him first. Betty. Hi. You look incredible. I did look incredible and I knew it. The past year had transformed me in ways that went far beyond physical appearance, though that had changed too. Regular workouts had given me a strength and confidence that showed in every movement. Success had given me a glow that no amount of makeup could replicate. And financial independence had given me the kind of poise that came from knowing I never had to depend on anyone else for my happiness. Thank you, I said simply. I heard about the gym. About how well you're doing. I'm proud of you. proud of me, as if his approval still mattered. As if I still needed his validation to feel good about my accomplishments. What do you want, Dylan? He ran his hands through his unwashed hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now just looked pathetic. I want to talk. To explain. To apologize. Okay. He blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Okay. I'll listen. But not here. I gestured toward the busy street, the gym windows where people could see us, the public nature of the confrontation he'd chosen. Come upstairs. We'll have privacy. Dylan followed me into the building and up to the roof deck. The sun was setting, painting the city skyline in shades of gold and pink, and the view from 30 feet up made everything below seem small and manageable. This is amazing, Dylan said, looking around at the outdoor gym equipment, the carefully designed space, the panoramic view. I had no idea you were planning something like this. You never asked. He flinched at that, which was exactly what I'd intended. Betty, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. What I did, leaving you the way I left you, choosing Laura over you, it was unforgivable. Yes, it was. I was confused. I thought I was unhappy in our marriage, and when Laura showed interest in me, it felt like validation. Like proof that I was still attractive, still desirable. And now I know that what I was feeling had nothing to do with you or Laura. It was about me. About my own insecurities and fears. About turning 30 and feeling like I hadn't accomplished anything important. I nodded. It was a more insightful analysis than I'd expected from Dylan, who'd never been particularly good at self-reflection. The thing is, he continued, leaving you didn't fix any of those problems. It just created new ones. Bigger ones. Because I realized that you weren't the source of my unhappiness. You were actually the best thing in my life. The one thing I should have protected instead of destroying. And Laura? Dylan's face darkened. Laura was a mistake. A terrible, costly mistake. I convinced myself I loved her, but really I was just using her to avoid dealing with the real issues in my life. She deserved better than that. You both did. So you left her at the altar. I couldn't go through with it. Standing there about to make vows to her, all I could think about was the vows I'd already broken with you. How meaningless promises are when they come from someone who doesn't know how to keep them. The sun had almost set now, and the city lights were beginning to twinkle below us. In the golden hour light, Dylan looked like a stranger. Someone I might have known once but couldn't quite place. What do you want from me, Dylan? He took a deep breath like he was about to dive off a cliff. I want you back. I want us back. I want the chance to prove that I can be the husband you deserved the first time. There was the moment I'd imagined 1,000 different ways over the past year. Dylan Wilson on his knees, metaphorically at least, begging for forgiveness and a second chance. A year ago I would have been tempted. Maybe even relieved. The old Betty had loved Dylan so much that she'd convinced herself his happiness mattered more than her own dignity. But the old Betty was gone. No, I said. No. No. Betty, please at least think about it. I don't need to think about it. The answer is no. Dylan stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. But I love you. I've always loved you. I just got confused for a while. You don't love me, Dylan. You love the idea of having me back. You love knowing that I'm still available as your safety net. You love the validation of being forgiven for something unforgivable. That's not true. It is true. And even if it weren't, even if you had genuinely realized that you loved me more than you loved Laura, it wouldn't matter. Why not? Because I don't love you anymore. The words hung in the air between us like a blade. Dylan's face went white, then red, then white again. You don't mean that. I do mean it. I loved you for 3 years, Dylan. Completely, devotedly, sometimes stupidly. And you threw that love away for the chance to sleep with my sister. You don't get to come back a year later and expect that love to still be waiting for you like a loyal dog. But people change. Yes, they do. I changed. I became someone who knows her worth. Someone who doesn't need a man's approval to feel valuable. Someone who would rather be alone than be with someone who sees her as second best. Dylan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. When he spoke again, his voice was small and defeated. So that's it? We're really over. We were over the day you told me you wanted Laura instead of me. This conversation is just me making sure you understand that. And there's nothing I can do? Nothing I can say? No way to prove that I've changed. I considered the question seriously. Not because I was reconsidering, I wasn't, but because Dylan deserved an honest answer. You could prove you've changed by building a life that makes you happy without needing to destroy someone else's life to get it. You could prove you've changed by taking responsibility for your choices instead of making excuses for them. You could prove you've changed by leaving me alone and letting me be happy with someone else. Someone else. Dylan's voice sharpened. There's someone else? I smiled, thinking of Caleb, of his steady presence, his unwavering support, the way he looked at me like I was already everything I was trying to become. There might be. Who? That's not your business anymore. Dylan's face went through a series of expressions: hurt, anger, jealousy, and finally something that might have been acceptance. I guess I deserve that. You do. He turned to go, then stopped and looked back at me one more time. For what it's worth, Betty, I really am sorry. And I really am proud of what you've built here. You're amazing. I was an idiot for not seeing that when I had the chance. Yes, I agreed. You were. After he left, I sat on the roof deck until the stars came out, feeling lighter than I had in months. The conversation I'd been dreading, the confrontation I'd been both anticipating and fearing, was over. And it had gone exactly as it should have. Dylan Wilson was officially in my past. Now it was time to figure out my future. The future started to take shape 3 months later, on the night Phoenix Fitness celebrated its first anniversary. The party was Caleb's idea. A combination grand opening for the new Pinnacle Heights location and anniversary celebration for the original downtown gym. He'd transformed the rooftop deck into something magical, with string lights and catered food and a jazz quartet that made everything feel like a movie scene. All the people who'd believed in Phoenix Fitness from the beginning were there. Margaret Blackwood and her influential friends, the original members who'd taken a chance on an unknown gym, the corporate clients who'd become steady revenue streams. Even Victoria Chen was there, looking proud of the property she'd helped me lease when I was just a divorced woman with a crazy dream and a settlement check. But as the evening wore on, I found myself looking for Caleb. He'd been strangely absent for most of the party, appearing just long enough to make sure everything was running smoothly before disappearing again. I finally found him on the lower level of the gym, sitting alone in one of the private training rooms with the lights dimmed. Hiding from your own party? I asked. Thinking, he said. Come sit with me. I settled beside him on the bench, suddenly aware that we were alone together in a way we rarely were anymore. Over the past year, our relationship had grown deeper and more complicated, but also more careful. We'd both been cautious about crossing lines, about moving too fast, about risking the business partnership and friendship that had become so important to both of us. What are you thinking about? I asked. This. He gestured around the gym. What you've accomplished in just 1 year. It's extraordinary, Betty. We accomplished it, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. You would have found another way, another partner, another path. You're unstoppable when you set your mind to something. There was something in his voice, a finality that made my stomach clench. Caleb, what's going on? You're talking like you're saying goodbye. Not goodbye, but transition maybe. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. I got an offer yesterday. A big company in Chicago wants to buy my marketing firm. It's a lot of money, Betty. Life-changing money. And they want me to stay on as regional director for the Midwest. My heart sank. Chicago. Chicago. That's wonderful. Congratulations. Is it wonderful? Because it doesn't feel wonderful. Of course it is. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. Maybe. Or maybe it's just another way to run away from something important. I looked at him confused. What would you be running away from? Instead of answering, Caleb stood up and walked to the window overlooking the street. The party was still going strong on the roof deck. I could hear laughter and music drifting down from above. Betty, can I ask you something? Always. When Dylan came back and asked for another chance, did you ever consider saying yes? The question surprised me. No. Not for a second. Why not? Because I didn't love him anymore. Because I'd learned the difference between settling for what's comfortable and waiting for what's extraordinary. Caleb turned around, and in the dim light from the street I could see something in his eyes that made my breath catch. What if I told you I was falling in love with you? The world seemed to stop spinning. Caleb. What if I told you I'd been falling in love with you since the day I found you on that roof deck, planning to build something impossible? What if I told you that watching you succeed has been the greatest privilege of my life, but watching you succeed without being able to tell you how I really feel has been torture? I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. Caleb, what if I told you the only reason I'm considering Chicago is because I'm terrified that if I stay, I'll do something stupid like confess that you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met and I can't imagine building a life without you in it? Is that what you're doing now? I asked quietly. Something stupid? Probably. I walked toward him, each step feeling like a choice between the safe path and the extraordinary one. Caleb Whalen, I said, reaching up to touch his face. You brilliant, complicated, wonderful man. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a terrifying thing. Because I think I might be falling in love with you too. The kiss that followed was nothing like the careful, polite kisses Dylan and I had shared. This was urgent and desperate and full of a year's worth of suppressed longing. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Don't take the job in Chicago, I whispered against his lips. Give me a reason not to. Because Phoenix Fitness is expanding and I need a partner I can trust. Because this city is our city now and we've built something beautiful here together. Because I want to find out what happens when Betty Wilson stops playing it safe and takes the biggest risk of her life. Which is falling in love with her best friend. Caleb smiled, the kind of smile that could power the entire downtown district. I was hoping you'd say that. He reached into his other jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. This is crazy, he said, and probably too soon and definitely not how I planned to do this, but Betty Wilson, will you marry me? Inside the box was the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. Not the biggest or the flashiest, but perfect in every way that mattered. A simple solitaire that caught the light like a promise. We've known each other for exactly 13 months, I pointed out. Best 13 months of my life. I'm a terrible romantic risk. I was married before, divorced before, betrayed by my own family before. And you survived it all and built an empire. If anything, that makes you a better risk. People will say it's too fast, too soon, too complicated. People said you'd never make it as a business owner too. How did that work out for them? I looked at Caleb, really looked at him. This man who'd believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Who'd celebrated every success and weathered every setback like they were his own. Who'd never once made me feel like I had to choose between love and ambition, between being successful and being cherished. Yes, I said. Yes, yes, yes. The ring fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for my finger its entire existence. From the roof deck above us, the party continued. A celebration of everything I'd built from the ashes of my old life. But down in the quiet training room, holding the hand of the man I was going to marry, I realized the real celebration was just beginning. 1 year later. The text from Dylan came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 years after he'd walked out of our kitchen and changed everything. Betty, I saw the engagement announcement in the paper. Congratulations. You look happy. You deserve happiness. I showed the message to Caleb over breakfast on the roof deck of our new penthouse apartment, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city we'd conquered together. Generous of him, Caleb said dryly, sipping his coffee. He's trying to be the bigger person now. It's too late, but he's trying. Are you going to respond? I considered it for a moment, then deleted the message without answering. Dylan Wilson had lost the right to commentary on my happiness the day he chose my sister over our marriage. The engagement announcement had run in the Sunday business section, not the lifestyle section, a choice that still made me smile. Local entrepreneurs announce engagement. The headline read above a photo of Caleb and me at the Phoenix Fitness corporate headquarters. We looked like what we were, successful, powerful, and completely devoted to each other. Phoenix Fitness now had 4 locations and was planning 3 more. I'd been featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine as one of 30 under 30 business leaders to watch. Caleb's marketing firm had doubled in size, and he'd turned down 2 more offers from major corporations who wanted to buy him out. We'd built something extraordinary together, not just the businesses but the life. The kind of partnership I'd never known was possible, where success felt better when it was shared and challenges felt manageable when you weren't facing them alone. Ready for today? Caleb asked, checking his watch. Today was the grand opening of Phoenix Fitness location number 5, the flagship facility in the city's most prestigious shopping district. It was also the day we'd chosen to have our official engagement party, because why celebrate one milestone when you could celebrate two? The new facility was everything I'd dreamed of and more. 15,000 square feet of cutting-edge equipment, luxury amenities, and a rooftop deck that made the original one look quaint by comparison. The membership waiting list was already 3 months long, and we hadn't even officially opened yet. As we pulled up to the building, I saw a familiar figure standing across the street. Laura, looking nothing like the broken girl in the wedding dress from 2 years ago. She'd cut her hair into a sharp bob, traded her flowing dresses for a business suit, and according to the reports I'd heard through family channels, was working as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup. She'd also been in therapy, had stopped drinking, and had reportedly not dated anyone since the disaster with Dylan. Our eyes met across the street, and for a moment we just looked at each other. Then Laura raised her hand in a small wave, not friendly exactly but acknowledging. I nodded back the same way I might acknowledge any stranger who'd caught my attention. "Is that your sister?" Caleb asked. "Used to be." Caleb squeezed my hand as we walked into the building. "No regrets." "None." The engagement party was perfect. A careful balance of business networking and personal celebration that reflected exactly who Caleb and I had become together. Margaret Blackwood gave a speech about female entrepreneurship that made half the room cry. The mayor presented me with a key to the city for outstanding contributions to public health and business development. 3 different reporters asked for interviews. But the moment that mattered most came at the end of the night, when it was just Caleb and me alone in the empty gym, surrounded by the evidence of everything we'd built. "Do you remember what you said the first day we met?" Caleb asked, pulling me into his arms. "That you had nice eyes?" "Before that, you asked if I'd ever been to a gym where I felt like I mattered." "I remember. I hadn't. Until I met you. You made me matter, Betty. Not because of what I could do for your business or how I could help you succeed. Just because of who I am. You made me matter too. But more than that, you made me realize I'd always mattered. I just hadn't known it yet." Caleb spun me around, and in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors that lined the walls, I caught a glimpse of us together. Him in his perfectly tailored suit, me in a dress that cost more than my car used to, both of us glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from building something meaningful with someone you love. 2 years ago, I'd been Betty Wilson, the wife who wasn't enough. The sister who was easily replaced. The woman who'd needed a man's approval to feel valuable. Now I was Betty Whalen to be, owner of a $1 million business empire, fiancée to a man who saw me as an equal partner in everything, and most importantly, a woman who knew her own worth. The transformation was complete. I'd risen from the ashes of my old life and become something I'd never imagined possible. Not just successful but powerful. Not just loved but cherished. Not just happy but fulfilled. Dylan and Laura had thought they were taking something from me when they destroyed my marriage. Instead, they'd given me the greatest gift of my life. The chance to find out who I really was when I stopped trying to be what everyone else needed me to be. As Caleb and I locked up the gym and walked out into the night, I felt nothing but gratitude for the betrayal that had set me free. Because without it, I never would have discovered that Betty Wilson was capable of building an empire. And I never would have learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming so extraordinarily happy that your enemy's opinions of you become completely irrelevant. The city lights twinkled around us like a crown, and for the first time in my life I felt like royalty. Not because of what I'd taken from anyone else, but because of what I'd given to myself. Permission to be extraordinary.